Today we're going to be looking at task 2 on the RBT task list, which is discontinuous measurement procedures. The first discontinuous measurement is whole interval. Whole interval recording breaks a longer observation period into smaller blocks of time and checks whether or not the target behavior occurs during an entire smaller segment. Whole interval recording tends to underestimate occurrences of behavior. So one of the important things throughout this video is that these procedures have a visual component that tends to be more helpful in learning them than a lot of other RBT procedures. So while this might not make a lot of sense yet, once you see the visual, it's going to click a little bit. So here you have an example of a whole interval recording. We're taking a 15-minute entire segment, breaking it down into 3 5-minute smaller blocks, and these blue bars right here are going to tell us when the behavior is occurring. So as we can see, the behavior starts 30 seconds, maybe a minute into the first segment and lasts all the way until just before 10 minutes, probably about 9.5 minutes. However, if you remember, whole interval only cares about whether or not a behavior occurs during an entire segment. So because we have this break at the beginning, this first 30 seconds or a minute, where it's not occurring, even though it takes up the vast majority of the first segment, whole interval is not going to record the behavior happening there. Likewise for the second segment, from 5 to 10 minutes, there's a little gap right at the end, and whole interval has to last the entire segment. So again, even though it's taking up the majority, and this is one continuous behavior that lasts for more than 5 minutes, which is what our segments are broken into, whole interval is only checking from 5 to 10 minutes did the behavior occur the entire time. And in this case, it did not, so we're not recording a check for the second segment either. However, from 10 minutes to 15 minutes, the behavior did occur continuously throughout the entire duration, so whole interval would record a plus mark or a check or an occurrence of the behavior, whatever your system uses. So if we're looking at this, from 0 to 5 minutes, we would not record the behavior occurring. From 5 to 10 minutes, we would not record the behavior occurring. From 10 to 15 minutes, we would record the behavior occurring. And this is why whole interval tends to underestimate behavior. Because as you can see, there's maybe a minute, minute and a half total in this total observation period that we're looking at, where the behavior wasn't occurring, but we're still only marking one occurrence of it. Now, partial interval is very similar to whole interval. We're still taking a longer observation period, breaking it down into smaller blocks of time. However, with partial interval, all that we're checking is whether or not the behavior occurs at all during each segment. And partial interval tends to overestimate the occurrences of behavior. So here we have our new behavior chart that we're looking at. From 0 to 5 minutes, we see that there are 3 occurrences of the behavior for various durations. However, all partial interval is checking is, does the behavior happen or not? The behavior happened, cool, give it a check mark. From 5 to 10 minutes, there was no occurrence of the behavior. And then from 10 to 15 minutes, it occurred the entire time, but we're still only giving it 1 check mark. So this is important to see that in the first segment, we have 3 instances of the behavior, or a frequency count of 3. In the third segment, we have a frequency count of 1. The durations are different, but they're still going to count the same way as far as partial interval recording is concerned, because all we're checking is, did the behavior occur at all during each of these small segments? So for this one, from 0 to 5 minutes, yes. 5 to 10 minutes, no. 10 to 15 minutes, yes. Momentary time sampling is the one that is a little bit different out of this group. So we're still going to take the same basic premise. We're going to take a longer observation period, break it into smaller blocks of time. However, this time, what we're checking is at the end of each period specifically, at that moment, is the behavior occurring right now or not? And momentary time sampling can over or underestimate behavior just depending on that specific occurrences of the behavior. So here we see From 0 to 5 minutes, it occurred most of the time, but specifically at the 5-minute mark, the behavior was not occurring, so momentary time sampling is going to record no. From the 5 to 10-minute mark, the behavior starts about halfway through and lasts for the rest of our observation period. So because it's occurring at the 10-minute mark, specifically right at 10 minutes, you have a timer, it goes off, you look up, behavior is occurring, yes. And it's still occurring at the 15-minute mark, so we're going to put a second yes. Even though this is one continuous behavior, we're still going to count it twice because it ran through the 10-minute mark and the 15-minute mark. So just remember, whole interval, did it occur for the entire period or not? Partial interval, did it occur at all during that period? And momentary time sampling is, at the end of each period specifically, is the behavior occurring right then? So let's look at some questions, the way they might be presented on the RBT exam. So question 1, how many occurrences of behavior would a whole interval record? And the answer would be 2. It would be the first and third segments. Example question 2. How many occurrences of behavior would partial interval record? The answer would be 3. All 3 segments would be recorded by partial interval in that case. And example question 3. How many occurrences of behavior would momentary time sampling record? The answer is 2. It would be the first and the third segment. So that's going to wrap up task list 2. It's one of the shorter ones. Next time we're going to be looking at task list 3 and continuing our way throughout the entire task list to get you ready to either take your initial RBT exam or take your recertification exam.